Welcome to today's KM World webinar, brought to you by Accenture, Igloo and Reveille. I'm Mary D. Ojala, Conference Program Director, Information Today, Inc. I will be the moderator for today's broadcast. Our presentation today is titled Top Trends in KM for 2018. Before we get started, I want to explain how you can be part of this broadcast. There will be a question and answer session. If you have a question during the presentations, just type it into the question box provided and click on the Submit button. We will try to get to as many questions as possible, but if your question has not been selected during the show, you will receive an email response to it within a few days. And if you would like a copy of the presentation, you can download a PDF from the resource icon on the console once the event is archived. Now, let me introduce our speakers for today. Cameron Kahn, formerly CEO of Search Technologies and now Managing Director, Accenture. Gavin McLeod, Product Marketing Manager, Igloo. And Sean Allen, VP of Marketing for Reveille. To review the speakers' bios, please click on the arrow under the speaker's photo. And now, let's move into today's presentation. So let me welcome Cameron Kahn, Managing Director, Accenture. Cameron?
Thank you, Mary D. Thank you to the KM organization for putting on this event, and also thank you to the audience for attending today. As Mary D said, my name is Cameron Kahn. I'm now a Managing Director of Accenture, and I run the Content Analytics Group. And today I'm going to talk about what we are seeing as the top trends in the KM space, and specifically talking about what we're seeing at our customer installations. Before I jump into the trends, I want to talk to you a little bit about who we are. Until August the 1st, we were an independent company, Search Technologies, and we were acquired by Accenture on the 1st of August to form what is the Content Analytics Group now at Accenture. Search Technologies was a company that focused on building applications based on the enterprise search platforms that are available today. And we'd worked with many, many customers building different use cases that I'll talk about. We joined Accenture to help Accenture build applications around unstructured data. And so today, content analytics for us is using search and associated technologies to help really build applications that leverage unstructured content, which of course we see a lot of in KM applications. While we were Search Technologies, and increasingly today, we were applying search and associated technologies to build a variety of use cases. We did not focus on specific industries like life sciences or financial services. We tried to address the problems that are common across all of the industries. And this is a sample of some of the use cases that we have customers building and using today. Corporate-wide search is your traditional enterprise search capability inside an organization and often underpins a KM solution. And enterprise data lakes is closely associated, but you'll see a variety of other use cases here that often end up being part of an overall knowledge management application. And we'll get into some of these use cases a little bit later on. So my topics for today and the things that we talk most about with our customers are listed here. So the power of search, we'll get into that. Machine learning and AI, which is now becoming a very common theme across all of our customers. Natural language processing, and finally, keeping content safe. And by keeping content safe, I'm talking about protecting IP within the organization. So we're going to look at all four of these areas and how they impact our knowledge management implementations today. So let me start with search, which is obviously near and dear to my heart. This is a quote that I really like and really says a lot about where we are, from Ryan White at Microsoft, basically talking about the fact that search is evolving. And over the time that we have been in business, we have seen search move from the first generation of search back in the early 2000s with FAST and Google GSA and autonomy, all the way through to today where you're linking search together with big data technologies to do some very sophisticated things. And so we think that there's a lot of room for the search technology to evolve, and we're seeing that more and more. And search in a KM implementation we see is still very, very important. And in our customers' cases, it's the primary interface for most of the knowledge management projects. And one of the reasons that search is often used to underpin these KM solutions is that it scales very, very easily. It's very, very fast when implemented properly, and also it's very easy to use. It's schema-free. You can point it at unstructured content and get good results. Now, just using search in an implementation of KM without doing some work around the side of search doesn't end up with good results. And so we talk to a lot of our customers about the need for organizing content, writing data model design documents with the business owners before you start to index content, and also to use natural language processing and query parsing to enable search to be effective. So relevancy is often the most difficult thing to achieve on a consistent basis within a KM application, and so using search is great, but it has to be used in an effective way. Moving on from search, what we have seen over the years is that we can combine search with technologies like Hadoop, and we work a lot with Cloudera to enable us to do some very sophisticated things. And I can give you an example of one of our customers in the recruitment space. We started working with them back in 2005, 2006 to help them match jobs and candidates, and they were using straight search, getting a list of results and then picking through those results and finding the right candidates. What we ended up doing was combining search with machine learning and big data technologies to produce a match application where we were doing statistical analysis of the jobs, statistical analysis of the resumes, and doing automatic matches so that when a recruiter comes in now, they see the top 5 results as defined by the match application, which really improved efficiency. And that's just one example of where combining search with big data and AI can get you incremental results. And we're seeing that as another trend that is, we see it a lot in our customer base right now. The third thing that I think is extremely important to look at is how the users interact with the system. We have done a lot of work on the back end with content processing via our platform Aspire and enabling people to add metadata and really normalize data so the search engine has help in order to create relevancy. But on the front end, we've worked for a long time on query parsing to enable us to understand what a user is trying to convey when they construct a query. And that's now evolving into natural language processing. And so we're building toolkits to enable us to build more intelligent user interfaces to bring back better results. These are some of the areas that we have seen a lot of interest in. So customer intelligence is a big area that we're seeing, but also customer support. And on the topic of customer support, you'll see now a big move towards virtual agents and chatbots, and our customers are very much looking at implementing these kinds of technologies. But natural language processing can help not just on the front end, but it can also help you organize the data before it's indexed and presented to the users. The query understanding is helping to expand the queries so that they are more understood by the search platform, and then doing statistical language processing to enable us to be able to create things like question and answer systems that go hand in hand with knowledge management solutions. So one use case of natural language processing that we've seen a lot are chatbots. And chatbots, virtual agents, are popping up pretty much everywhere, and most people who have a sophisticated internal application will be looking at chatbots to help ease the user's interaction with the system. And so here are some of the things that we're seeing. So filling orders over the phone with large telcos. How do I change my phone number for customer service with large telcos? And then internally, a lot of business tasks like reserving conference rooms and time cards and some of the more mundane things that can be handled with a chatbot. So we're using voice and also text combined with natural language processing to return answers for people who are interacting with the unstructured data within the organization. So we're seeing this as quite an increase. The interest in chatbots is increasing significantly, and so this is something that I think people should be looking at. And the final thing that I would like to touch on is electronic communications monitoring. And by this, I mean the protecting your internal content. We have seen a number of cases within our customers where they have had breaches of their content, or their content has not necessarily been monitored properly to stop insider threats. So we've worked now with a financial institution and also a government agency to help protect internal content. So what we've done is we've used search, we've used sentiment analysis, and we've used machine learning to be able to look at internal communications, both email, voice, chat, to monitor the behavior of individuals inside an organization, monitor sentiment, and also monitor their activity so that there aren't breaches. So we've worked with a bank who were actually fined a lot of money for a scandal that involved LIBOR rigging. We've now implemented a system that looks at the emails before they go into a compliant email archive, and we're able to detect whether or not there's activity that we don't like that's going on and be able to stop that before it happens. Similarly, with a government agency, we're looking at the sentiment of people within the organization to detect whether or not there's an insider threat that might surface in the future. So that's also an area that is quite hot with our customers at the moment. So with the last couple of minutes, I'd like to just summarize and highlight the 4 areas that I've talked about. Search has been around a long time, it's evolving, and it's important to a knowledge management application, and it's extremely powerful, especially when combined with newer technologies like machine learning and big data. Hadoop is almost always in our implementations now. NLP has been around for a long time, but it's coming of age, and people are beginning to use it in a business context. It's not just the Siri and Alexa applications that are using their natural language processing. It's now being used inside of the organization in quite effective ways. And finally, keeping the content safe is becoming a very key element of a knowledge management solution. I'd like to thank you all for your attention for the last 15 minutes. Clearly, there's a lot here that we could talk about, and I'd be happy to answer any questions after all the sessions are done. And if there are any other questions afterwards, you can reach us at this email address. So thank you again, and back to you, Mary D.
Thank you, Cameron. And now let me welcome Gavin McLeod, Product Marketing Manager for Igloo. Gavin.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today. As Mary Dean mentioned, I'm Gavin McLeod, Product Marketing Manager at Igloo. My position at Igloo is unique in the sense that I'm responsible for keeping a pulse on market trends and customer requirements to develop our position in the marketplace and feedback into product development. I've been in knowledge management space for more than 8 years in varying capacities, but I won't bore you with all those details because I know you can read all about that in my bio. So today I'm going to be focusing on the new workplace realities that create knowledge management challenges for organizations, specifically those that can result in serious losses in productivity. I'll cover conditions you should create for successful knowledge transfer, and finally I'll discuss strategies for how you can do this. But first, I'd like to spend 1 minute to tell you a little bit about Igloo and why we are so passionate about the topic of knowledge management. Igloo is a digital workplace solutions company. You can think of us as the next generation intranet, a digital representation of your physical workplace. We connect people to each other, to information, and to the technologies that they depend on. We inspire organizations to communicate, collaborate, share knowledge, and engage employees more effectively. At Igloo, we believe that this is mission critical for achieving organizational objectives. We do this by enabling organizations to move beyond a traditional intranet to a digital destination that is beautiful, easy to manage, and solution-oriented. From brand centers, team rooms, newsrooms, onboarding, and everything in between, Igloo's portfolio of digital workplace solutions integrates with the apps and systems your business relies on and centralizes information for a single source of truth. The platform we've built and the solutions we've designed have been adopted by nearly 1,000 customers across 80 countries. We've been in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for 7 years in a row, named KM World's Top 100 Companies That Matter for the past 6 years, as well as Trend-Setting Product of 2017, and we're ranked #1 in Enterprise Social by IDC. But enough about us. Let's talk about the trends we're seeing in knowledge management and how we can address them. The reality is that there's a shortage of skilled workers, and the war for talent has emphasized the importance of the employee experience. You guys know this. And as a result, employees are demanding a certain level of flexibilities in their jobs, and they expect consumer-like technology experiences. This means access to their work from anywhere across all of their devices. The trends in remote work emphasize this reality. Gallup reports last year 43% of American employees worked remotely in some capacity, and this trend is increasing. With all this flexibility, you'd think that employees would be hyper-engaged, but they're not. 87% of global employees are not engaged. 67% are actively disengaged. This means employees sleepwalk through their day, putting time, but no energy, passion, or creativity into their work. They don't trust their leaders, they're not emotionally connected to the organization, and they're not going above and beyond the call of duty, giving zero discretionary effort. We also know the office employees are not at their desk 50 to 60% of the time, instead accessing their work from mobile devices, and they use an average of 30 cloud apps to conduct their work. So what does this mean? Well, as employees and their knowledge increasingly become geographically and technologically separated, we continue to monitor the effect on individual, team, and organizational performance. Now, there's more info than ever before. It's faster to access from anywhere, but it's harder to find. According to McKinsey, employees spend 9.3 hours a week on average searching for information. Now, the improvements we're seeing to search are helping this, but time spent searching for information is increasing. IDC predicts the amount of digital information will grow by a factor of 30 and the number of files by a factor of 60 by 2020. We also see that the U.S. has recently hit a historically low productivity growth rate of 1.1% compared to an average of 2.3%. This is the lowest productivity growth rate in over 60 years. Information is scattered, and so we spend a great deal of time searching for information, analyzing it, and validating that it's current and can be trusted. Employees are stuck sharing files and information through email, instant messaging, and file sharing tools which provide limited visibility to groups. People end up spending a great deal of time publishing this information to multiple locations to get around this. Requests for knowledge are frequently sent to the wrong people. A lot of the same questions are asked repeatedly when answers should be self-service. This also goes back to the wasted time spent communicating or publishing knowledge across silos. So how can we enable our organizations to share knowledge more effectively and efficiently? Let's first look at the conditions that affect successful knowledge transfer. They are corporate culture, management and processes, the content itself and its context, and finally the technology. In the physical workplace, knowledge is commonly exchanged in face-to-face conversation, a social currency, if you will. You exchange your knowledge for another's. You trusted the information to the extent you trusted the individual, and your reward was both the knowledge, increased credibility in some cases, and the social encounter itself. In the modern digital workplace, this exchange is not so simple. We need to instill a culture that encourages the open and free sharing of knowledge for broad consumption. And we need mechanisms in place that signal a piece of knowledge to be trustworthy and current. The best way to do this is with executive sponsorship and support from the management team. This means recognizing good knowledge sharing practices, assigning clear governance accountability in the form of MBOs if you have to, and removing workload barriers for staff to properly publish their knowledge and ideas. The content itself also plays an impactful role, as well as how it is organized and the degree of context provided. When content is structured in a way that considers both your organizational structure and the way your people work, for example, the way they search or share information, you are optimizing conditions for successful knowledge transfer. A big part of this is putting knowledge in the context of a solution to a real organizational problem, making information insightful and actionable. Finally, technology. The use of best-of-breed applications can lead to significant short-term productivity gains for individuals and sometimes teams. But as the data shows, it often hinders the broader dissemination of knowledge and cross-functional collaboration. The net result is a stagnation in productivity growth. Technologies that help optimize conditions for knowledge transfer create a destination, or a single point of truth, through the chaos of technology change. Leveraging Search Federation, like our previous presenter talked about, allows users to search multiple information silos at once. Advances in personalization and natural language processing are making it even easier for employees to find what they need, and this is great. And as content publishers, analytics at a user and content level is providing the insights on how we can further optimize our information architectures and make better content. So how do we move forward? Well, moving forward, look to create a destination for your digital workplace where knowledge, communication, and collaboration can come together for the entire organization. Clearly define your governance strategy, your objectives, and then assign accountability to specific solution areas across your departments. And to drive a culture of knowledge sharing, turn knowledge repositories into knowledge solutions that solve a specific problem. Make them social and engaging by building the sharing and capturing of knowledge into the workflow. Ensure you're able to capture the dialogue on content within context. These are usually where insights are generated. Measure success through analytics. Discuss your strategy with peers in your industry, and be sure to collect user feedback. Finally, build a roadmap. At Igloo, we have a saying, think big, start small, scale fast. Not everything needs to be done at once. Solve your most prevalent business challenges first, improve based on insights, and deploy your solution roadmap quickly. I've been using the term solutions a lot today. Here's a practical example of what I mean by solutions, specifically those that will help you centralize different types of knowledge. Explicit knowledge, as many of you probably already know, is the data, information, documents, records, and files you store across the organization. This knowledge is relatively easy to understand and document. Examples of solutions for this type of knowledge are governance and policy centers, employee handbooks, and employee onboarding walkthroughs. Now, tacit knowledge is formed through experience, thinking, collaborative dialogue, and feedback that comes from people. This knowledge is more difficult to explain and verbalize. Solutions that encourage this type of knowledge transfer are focused on facilitating dialogue and ideation, while centralizing the documentation of the best practices. Solution examples here are management and supervisor areas, communities of practice or interest. The use of a company directory that showcases expertise can also be used to encourage dialogue between employees who are equipped to solve a common problem. By using a solution-based approach to knowledge transfer, you provide the means of centralizing technologies, processes, and information so that people are more engaged and productive. If you'd like to learn more about Igloo or our portfolio of solutions, you can check us out at igloosoftware.com/knowledge. And of course, at the end of the presentation, we'll be fielding any questions. And if we're not able to, please feel free to contact us at the number on the screen, or you can find more contact options on our website.
Thank you, Gavin. And now, let me welcome Sean Allen, VP of Marketing at Reveille. Sean?
Thanks, Mary D. It's a great collection of topics and a fun conversation so far. Happy to be a part of it. I'm going to spend the next few minutes defining content experience and talking about why it matters and why it's hard. Even as important as user or customer experience are, this higher level concept actually is critical to anyone charged with managing content that is the lifeblood of their business. So we all used to live in a world where all enterprise content was cleanly managed by one vendor, usually in one solution, inside a handful of repositories. Life was relatively simple because of adding workflows or approvals or security. It was all centralized, consistent, and predictable. But as we've all witnessed over time, the ECM market has grown. It's fragmented, consolidated, expanded, evolved. Analysts have even changed the category name from ECM to Content Services Platforms, or CSP, in an acknowledgement of that shift. Companies are no longer simply using one content management solution from a single vendor, right? It's getting messy. There are a number of different solutions, approaches, and architectures used to get the job done. Now, this creates a pretty good eventuality for organizations going down this path, as it creates a bunch of flexibility. The problem is that it also creates chaos, inconsistency, and a lack of visibility. In an equation that builds out to a not great result that we'll go through here, new requirements. Those are things like business users who are growing accustomed to the great apps that they have to use on any device that they have to use them on in their personal life. And they want that same kind of clarity and ease of use in what they're doing in the enterprise. That's driving IT to implement the multiple solutions that I just finished talking about and complicating the ECM or CSP landscape. And that generally drives a vendor rationalization that is often anything but, and an implementation of complex systems. So if you have these multiple solutions and you're trying to connect all of them together, what you end up with is complexity, especially when you roll in a hybrid deployment type model where many organizations are leaning cloudward these days, but they still have a very significant investment in on-premises content management software. All of these pieces roll together, if not properly managed, into a poor overall experience in dealing with the content. Those complex systems that I talked about, when I'm trying to weave together a bunch of inconsistent applications, I end up with security holes, and all of these things work very well together to decrease productivity over time. And so what we talk about in general with our customers at Reveille and what we see in the marketplace is looking at all of these issues through a different lens. One of those lenses is experience, and this is the customer and user experience that I alluded to in the opening. This is understanding the performance analytics and the adoption of the applications that you're creating. You layer on top of that security concerns. And this is understanding the behavior of your users and what they're doing with the content in your environment, and arming yourselves to handle audit as those inevitably come down and create a massive time sink in the organization. And then operations, making sure everything continues to run cleanly. So taking a look at things like upgrade and capacity planning and visibility of what you're offering from a content services perspective. All of these things together is what's defined as content experience. It's not user experience, it's not customer experience, but it's content experience, the experience of your users with the content in your environment and the systems that are there to present it. So let's dive a little bit deeper into each one of these. This poor experience that we talk about needs to be addressed by putting approaches, systems, technologies, etc. in place that enhance the performance of your system and increase the adoption of the applications that you're creating for your users, whether those users be internal partners or even customers. These security holes need to be addressed by doing the same along the lines of increasing security and audit capabilities. And the loss of productivity, you need to be able to report and you need to be able to plan on operations to truly get a sufficient handle on the overall content experience. So why is this hard? And fundamentally, the reason for that is because almost everything in your environment today that's taking a look at whether or not your house is burning down is looking at it from the outside in. And that works okay with general purpose tools, etc., to get those things done. The problem is that the first time you get a notification that there is a fire inside of your house is when the windows start breaking and smoke and fire start billowing out. But if you can instead change the perspective of where you're looking at this information to be on the inside, properly equipped and armed with fire hoses, etc., alarms, triggers, bells, and a detailed understanding of the design or architecture of the house that you're in, you're really in a much better position to understand what's going on. So you have to shift your perspective from looking at outside the house to actually being inside the house and looking out. So switching in to talk a little bit about the three different areas of content experience, from the perspective of the questions that you should be asking of your content and of your users and what's going on with them, and be in a position to answer things like, how is any particular application that I have in the environment, whether it be the one serving my content or whether it be the one that's interacting with my users like a loan origination app, how is it performing from their perspective? In that app, what features are being used and are they performing well? Are my users using the application the way that I intend them to? And is all of this money that I'm spending on these applications that I'm creating worth it? Are the applications themselves being adopted? And along the line for operations, we have things like, am I in a better position than I was before I upgraded? From a capacity perspective, when are things going to start breaking on the existing footprint as I add new apps, as I add new users, et cetera, et cetera? I want to be able to take a look and ask questions of my content infrastructure by group. What is the experience by the finance group or any other particular group in my organization? Even down to areas like chargeback and et cetera. How much was consumed in this particular period of time? And the last piece of this that I want to talk about is why user behavior itself matters. Because the data that we're talking about here is not just operational data, it's actually what's happening with users as they're interacting with content in the environment. 1 in 3 companies today are beginning to gather some user behavior information, while 3/4 of the infrastructure of the organizations would like to start doing it. And the reason is because this user analytics field, it measures change in behaviors. And so if you know when somebody is doing something right, you also know when somebody is doing something wrong. So if you can spot those behavioral anomalies, it allows you to very quickly spot things like insider threats and compromised accounts. In addition, as far as a rear view mirror goes, from an audit perspective, 8 out of 10 organizations say that their average audit cycle is 3 months, which is just horrible because there's, other than making sure that everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing, there's not a lot of positive innovation coming out of the area of audit. And 70% of organizations are expecting those regulations to extend, be added, get worse over time. So knowing how users interact with content, well, it simplifies that audit and clearly puts you in a position to save time, money, headache, banging head against wall, et cetera. And it really opens up a series of questions to be answered along the lines of behavioral security and audit, like have any documents been accessed from a strange location? Right? If somebody's come in from a part of the globe that I don't have any employees in, it might be interesting to know what content they're accessing and be in a position to block some of that. Can I see authorized user transaction patterns, and then the opposite of that, unauthorized or abnormal user transaction patterns? So an example of, if I have somebody that's normally accessing 50 documents in a week and suddenly they're accessing 50,000 documents in a day, even though they have access and authority to do so, it's pretty outside the norm, and somebody might want to be told about that to intervene. Who's accessed a particular document and who hasn't? So if there are particular documents that every employee in the organization needs to defend having gone through, it's an easy way to take a look at it if you can see what's going on with the users. And sending an alert if users' view or access patterns fall out of logical norms, right? So, back to the example of too many documents or many more documents than are normally accessed. So pulling it all back together in a summary, we talked about experience. Customer experience, user experience from a performance and application adoption perspective, security from a behavioral analytics and audit perspective, and operations from a upgrade and capacity planning, and from a content services visibility perspective. All of these things working together to drive what organizations need to be striving for, which is a positive content experience across all of the different systems that implement that. And that's precisely where Reveille fits, where we spend all of our time in harvesting the information from inside of that house and giving the proper insight and ability to react in that environment. Happy to talk to anyone more about that, and you can find us at reveillesoftware.com. Thank you for your time, and back to you.
Thank you, Sean. Now we do have questions that have been asked. I would remind you that if you still do have a question, you can still type it into that search box there. Let's start here. So this one, I believe, is for Gavin. How do you remove workload barriers in the conditions for successful knowledge transfer? You mentioned that as a point, and so this person would like to know a little bit more about that.
Sure. So, reducing workload barriers, I think, is a prioritization exercise. We're all working at 100% or more. Our focus is on what our priorities are, and priorities are set by leadership or your direct management. So I think when I speak about removing workload barriers, I think the key here is how do we convince leadership, or as managers, how do we make proper documentation and the governance of knowledge a priority? How do we make sharing of information a priority for our employees? So I think the key there is to turn to data. Once we have a foundation of good knowledge practices, we're improving productivity and innovation in the long term. So look at things like how long does it take to ramp up a new employee and make them productive through their onboarding? Well, good knowledge practices and good documentation, solutions oriented towards that are going to help make that person more productive, and showing a leader that data is going to help them prioritize good knowledge sharing practices and governance. You can also point to things like employee turnover. How much knowledge are you losing when an employee turns over if you're not doing it? So there's also the risk of not doing it. And then more information on some of the slides I had today, and I believe they're being shared out later, point to things like time spent looking for information. So if you use the data, I think leadership responds really well to data, and at the end of the day, it's leadership who sets the priorities.
Okay. Do either Cameron or Sean have anything to say on that question?
I do not.
Okay. This one I think is for you, Cameron. Do you find that customers and users are likely to use search functionality versus manually navigating through menu options?
Okay, thank you. So the simple answer to this question is it depends. And it depends on how well the search functionality has been implemented. I mean, we have, I can't tell you how many times we will come across customers who will say our search sucks, so that's what their users will tell them. And when you find that, you typically find that users are probably more likely to navigate through the menu options. But when you have an implementation of search that has been well thought through and well implemented, then they're more likely to just go straight to that search bar. And what I mean by well thought through and well implemented is what I was saying earlier in the presentation. When search sucks, it's generally not the search engine itself. It's the implementation, it's the organization of the content, how much thought have you put into what users are expecting to find when they put in a particular search query, how well have you normalized and enriched that content, and how well are you helping the query expand so that it can find the right content. So if the search functionality has been well implemented, then most definitely search is top of mind. If not, then people will do the hard work of navigating through menu options. So getting search right is important if you want to have users using that functionality.
Yeah. Since we're talking about trends, do you see any trending in this area more towards one way of searching or another?
No, I think that the trends around search are more to enhance it. Once you've got the basic search infrastructure in place and it's working well, people are then looking for the next level. And so implementing AI-based capabilities like I described before with the match application. So enabling unstructured content with big data is a trend that we're seeing, and then also towards NLP. One other trend that we're seeing is that while we're focused mostly on unstructured data, we're seeing search being used increasingly as a visualization tool on structured data. So if you have a huge amount of structured data and you want to visualize that quickly, a lot of our customers are telling us that the traditional methods of using databases is just too slow, and the search index is a far more efficient way of being able to slice and dice that content and visualize it. So we're seeing more structured data being accessed by search.
Interesting. Okay. Sean, this sort of goes along with trends and user behavior, I think. The different systems that I have managing my content all seem to have some level of tooling around management and audit. So why wouldn't I just use those?
Yeah, and it's a fantastic question, and it's a great place to start. The pieces of the content stack in modern organizations generally do come with some type of functionality that is great for diving in and doing troubleshooting once a problem has been noticed. The downside of going that route is that when you turn those on, they're not really meant to be on all the time, because there's a significant overhead penalty on the performance and response time of any one of those pieces that has that particular audit capability turned on. So while it is a great place to start, and it's a fantastic thing that the vendors are building that into their product, what we've seen is that you really need to be in a position to be pulling that data in a way that does not impact the underlying system. Otherwise, you're just kind of exacerbating the problem.
Yeah, okay. Cameron or Gavin, do either one of you have something to add to that? I'll take that as a no. Okay, we have another question here. This one I think should go to Gavin. So this person says, we've built intranets in the past in an attempt to centralize knowledge, but we struggle to get people to use them. Sounds familiar, actually. Do you have any recommendations for this?
Sure, yeah. I think this goes back to the conditions we need to implement for successful knowledge transfer. It really comes down to a few key questions, right? Is knowledge structured in a way that solves a specific problem? Mm-hmm. For me as an individual, or for my team, or for the company overall? Because when it solves a very specific problem, you keep people coming back, and you keep the information being shared there very specific and in context. And then think about how are we making it engage. Sorry, did you have a follow-up?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think how are we making it engaging and bringing people back, right? We need to capture dialogue and context, so it all contributes to the overall corporate intelligence. How are we incorporating the apps and enterprise systems that people rely on daily? I feel like a digital workplace destination needs to be able to present content from third-party systems in greater context and provides that centralized place to do searches. And lastly, just back to executive sponsorship, I think there needs to be an assigned accountability for information governance, or the solution will inevitably fail.
Yeah, I guess I do have a follow-up question, which is sort of along the lines of what I asked Cameron a minute ago. But in terms of trending, do you see changes over time in how people are reacting to intranets and this attempt to centralize knowledge?
Yeah, I think people are starting to adopt this solution mentality. Intranets were commonly a portal for everything. It became a dumping ground for a lot of people. I think right now that the trend is really to combine these technologies and these features from intranet providers like Igloo and do it in a way that goes after a specific problem, right? And I think when you do that, people are engaging much more.
Mm-hmm. So it's more expected.
I think so. I think people, in order to engage people, you need to show them how it helps. It's like, how does it help me, or how does it help my team, or as an executive, how is it helping my organization? So people need to see the clear benefits of what you're offering.
Okay. Did one of the rest of you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I do, Mary D. Oh, go ahead, Cameron.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, this is Cameron. Just a very quick point that an intranet is typically popular if people can find good information on there. And if there's good information in there and it's easily accessible, then we found that people will go to that particular site more and more often, and it becomes quite popular. So I think the ease of use of that centralized knowledge and the ease of findability is a factor here.
Isn't there also an issue with purging information that's no longer relevant? I think,
rather purging the information is one way, or making it less relevant by tagging the content such that more recent content is pushed higher is another way.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, somebody else wanted to say something in here.
I did. This is Sean from Reveille. As I listen to these great answers, I think it really points to one of the fundamental pieces of what I was talking about around content experience, and being able to get information out about how people are using the information. Right. So if you're properly instrumented, or if you're properly harvesting the right data and are able to get at it in a way that you can see how the organization is adopting the intranet, how the organization is using the content, what searches are being put in there, and look at it more holistically, you tend to get a better overall experience because you can tweak how you are doing the implementation. You can more fine-tune it to the people inside of your organization that are using it and how they're using it, et cetera, and just get better and iterate over time.
So that sounds like both human learning and machine learning sort of combined there.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Let's move on here. Cameron, quick question here, simple question, I guess. What search engine do you typically recommend? Or I guess, do you recommend?
We take a very agnostic view of the search platforms or any technology that go into our solutions, because it very much depends on what use case is being built and what environment you're looking at. So our typical approach is to assess what's being done or what the application is targeted at, and then recommend the right solution. We've seen good and bad implementations of all types of search engines. In some cases, people want a commercial search engine that is an end-to-end platform that may be easier to maintain. In other cases, there's a large IT organization who are okay with using open source components, and there are plenty of good open source tools like Elasticsearch and Solar that have been built into very large-scale applications. So it really depends on a number of factors, including the business factors as well as technical factors, such as the kind of content you're ingesting and how easily the solution can be supported once it's built.
Okay, I've got another recommendation question here on a different topic. This is for Gavin. What do you recommend for capturing dialogue in context, as you mentioned in your presentation? What do you recommend for doing that in a structured way?
So again, I think this kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier, and creating experiences for people that are focusing on solving a specific problem. So if I was to be a little bit more specific to how we do it at Igloo, it's, we drive people to a digital destination that you might call the intranet. And in that destination, you have solutions to solve different problems. So you might have the newsroom for disseminating information. You might have onboarding for bringing someone up to speed. When you create forums for dialogue, and you can use different tools. You can use microblog if you want to create a chatter. You have comments on content. There's a lot of different ways to do it, and it can vary. But what you essentially do is we tie conversation to specific content pieces, so that regardless of what happens to that content, whether you archive it or you move it, that dialogue is always captured in the context of that specific piece of content, which is then housed within the context of that solution. So you end up having the conversations and the dialogue all just kind of tied together nicely with the original subject matter. In a lot of cases, that dialogue is used to update the subject matter, and it kind of rolls forward. So the insights developed through dialogue is captured in the content and so forth, and everything ties neatly together into a specific solution.
Is that conversation then searchable?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it should be, so that you can find both the content as well as the dialogue, right? And I think this goes into, the more we can drive conversations back to a single destination where people can see everything that's happening, the more we are capturing the context of the decision making that happens throughout the organization. And that's the kind of, we talk about collective intelligence, but that's the collective wisdom of the organization that ends up being captured over time, and as people come and go, persists over time.
Okay. All right. Well, I love this question. I love any question that starts out with knowledge is power. So here we go. Knowledge is power. Sometimes the staff in an organization may not want to share their knowledge. How do we encourage knowledge-sharing behaviors other than working with the leadership team to make knowledge sharing a priority? I think this is one of those age-old questions in KM, but I think any of the three of you could take a whack at this one. Who'd like to start? If you don't, I'll call on you if you don't step up.
It's all right. I'll take. This is Sean. I'll take a quick swing. And from my perspective, the change management. Well, any change management comes with sticks and with carrots, right? But to understand what is actually happening is the first step in that from our perspective. In other words, you need to know who's contributing and who's not contributing, when they're doing it, how they're doing it, understand the overall behavior of the organization and the users and their interactions. I know I sound like a broken record, but we believe very firmly in understanding what people are doing and what insight there is at the intersection of users and content. So that's the first thing that I would add to it, and I bet that my co-presenters have some great stuff to add as well.
Gavin?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think analytics is a big part. I think too, from a cultural perspective, there's something to look at. I think the way that employees can encourage each other to share, sometimes identifying champions amidst departments who are really gung-ho about solving a specific problem or doing this, they can champion that cultural movement and encourage people to share by resharing or commenting or trying to spark dialogue within the context of that knowledge being shared. So, I mean, without leadership, the question specifies that, outside of getting leadership to buy in, what do you do? That's a tough one because they do set the priorities. But I think if the people are the ones pushing for this, and you have champions that are kind of pushing that cultural change in the organization, then I think that's a plus as well.
Mm-hmm. I think you also need to create champions if you don't have them.
Yes.
Cameron.
Yeah, I think, from my perspective, I now work at a company with over 400,000 people, and I think it's a cultural thing. The culture here at Accenture is to be very open about sharing information, and so there are champions, as my colleagues have just alluded to, in various locations, but there's also, an incentive to publish information and share information, and then from a technical point of view, making that information easy to get at is also important. So, I've seen it work very well here at Accenture, and I think it's culture and technology.
That's a good combination, indeed. Okay, I think we're close to time here, but I think we have time for one more question. So, Cameron, I think I'm going to direct this one to you. Who is responsible for improving search functionality? Is it vendors? Is it authors? Is it somebody else? What about search functionality?
Yeah, actually, it's a really timely question for me because I just this week I was at a life sciences customer where we were discussing exactly this question. So we have a commercial vendor of search technology. We have us as the integrator. We have the IT department, and then we have the business or the authors. And really, it's a combination of all of those people. So IT have been focused a lot on the search technology to tune that to make sure that the search functionality is working well. But you can only get so far without involving the business. And so what we're going to do with this organization now is basically get together with the business, look at the content, and find out how that content needs to be found. And so we're going to be defining data model designs, which can then be coded into the search engine to enable more efficient search functionality. So I think that the business has a responsibility to work with IT to say, to describe that content and make sure that it's understood by IT so they can then code it into the search engine. The vendor needs to make sure that the solution is at its optimum so that you're getting the right relevancy, and then IT has to pull it all together. So I think that without involving all constituents, it's not going to work.
So in your multiple choice question, the answer is all of the above.
Yeah, basically. It's
Okay.
to differing degrees, but it's all of the above. If you don't involve the business, then you end up guessing what people are looking for when they are typing in a particular query, and then you'll surface the wrong content.
Sure, sure. Okay, well, that is all the time we have for questions today. We apologize that we were unable to get to all the questions, but as I stated earlier, all the questions will be answered via email. So I would like to thank our speakers today, Cameron Kahn, Managing Director, Accenture, Gavin McLeod, Product Marketing Manager, Igloo, and Sean Allen, VP Marketing, Reveille.